The Icicle program, the in-cloud icing and large drop experiment, was done in part by research right here at the Hughes Technical Center in Egg Harbor Township. And join with me is Stephanie DiVito, who is an FAA research meteorologist for the Aviation Research Division. She was the Icicle lead. And we also have Danny Sims, a physical scientist for the FAA. He is the head of the in-flight icing program and co-lead for Icicle as well. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
You're very welcome. So let's start with the first question here. We're talking about icing conditions for aircraft, and let's just start from square one. Why is icing bad for an aircraft?
Well, Joe, icing is bad for an aircraft because ice will tend to build up along the wings of an aircraft, and anytime you disrupt the aerodynamic flow of an aircraft, such as by adding any type of fixtures or structure that shouldn't be there to a clean airfoil, it disrupts the handling characteristics. And if it's left unattended or ignored, it can lead to catastrophic effects. And these conditions happen in a surprisingly lot of circumstances throughout the entire year, primarily a wintertime phenomenon, but it can happen throughout the year.
Right. So the Icicle program took place between January and March of 2019. That was when you were actually out in the field, and you, for your experiments or for your, data collection, you were in Rockford, which is just outside of Chicago. That was your main hub where you actually had planes flying into icing conditions. So, Steph, I know you were actually on one of those flights. Just take us through what that flight was like. I got to imagine flying through some icing conditions might give you a couple of pits in your stomach, but, what was it like being on the plane, and what kind of research was collected on that flight as well?
So for the flights, we first off, the days started pretty early. So we were all up fairly early, having forecasting briefings and things like that. Once we decided where we were going to fly and what environment we were going to target, everybody would get, the crew for the aircraft would get the aircraft ready, and we'd all get on board and take off. And depending on the conditions we were targeting that day, you were either setting your stomach up for a bumpy ride, or you were anxiously waiting to see what you would possibly encounter. So, and whether or not it would be bumpy. Fortunately, for the two flights that were my flights that I flew on, we didn't encounter too much turbulence, at least based off of my personal strength. But yeah, so as far as the information that was collected during the flight, we were collecting information on the size, on the water droplet sizes of the cloud that we were flying through, whether or not there was drizzle and rain and any other kind of ice crystals that could be in there. So there were sensors that could take pictures at a very high resolution of these, and also collecting how many of these droplets and particles were in the air that we were flying through. We were collecting information on aerosols, as well as we had some remote sensing instruments, so such as radar and some other instruments. So it was very heavily instrumented, and we collected a large amount of data.
Right.
Also had instruments deployed on the ground at a couple of airports, and we collected data there as well.
So why collect all of this data now? Is there any advantages to doing this? It was in 2019, but during the current moments, and, what advantages do we have now that we didn't have in the past?
Well, as many weather enthusiasts might know, we've got some new high resolution satellites.
Just a couple.
Deployed.
Yeah.
In recent years. So we've had advancements in satellite information. We've had the deployment of dual polarization radar. About 20 years ago, we had the implementation of an automated surface observation network within the country. And then along the way, there have been a lot of advancements in technologies and weather tools that are under development, and technologies we can leverage to further develop some of these icing tools, if you will. And so we were really looking to capture data in the environment where there's a lot of data and a lot of high quality data that we can research further. But I'd like to ask Danny if there's anything he'd like to add on to that.
Yes, Stephanie, in addition to those technological advances that we have, we in the FAA, based off of what we have learned and along with industry, what we have jointly learned from accidents in the past is that there are different icing scenarios that one can encounter when they're flying. And so we have made efforts to change the certification requirements. These are the requirements that an aircraft, when it is being built, has to go through that will determine what type of environmental conditions it can end up flying in. We now know that all icing is not the same. There are very small droplets that could contribute to what we call Appendix C icing. There are much larger droplets that are what we call Appendix O. Those cause different impacts upon aircraft. So now our certification requirements are along those different types of scenarios in those two different appendices. And so our products, in order to be able to forecast those conditions, we need some very, very good data in order to compare our forecast products against. So that was another contributor as to why now is a very crucial time in order to be able to do this work and collect that data.
Right, and who are the people that are most going to benefit from this, and what are they actually going to benefit when all this data is assimilated and, you know, you guys are going to put out some kind of report, I'm sure, some kind of recommendations for different kinds of regulations in the future?
Ideally, this will support smaller aircraft and general aviation aircraft to certify to these different types of icing envelopes, such as the Appendix C and O that Danny mentioned. So that's the group of users that will most directly benefit, because this information we collected will help us improve icing weather tools and products that are made available with providing information specific to those types of aircraft and those types of users. But ideally, ultimately, it will be helpful to others in the aviation community as well for situational awareness and to help guide them in what and where they're choosing to fly and when they're choosing to fly. Danny, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, Stephanie, I think you did a very good job of covering that. It's a safety issue primarily for small aircraft, but I would say as we move forward, we're going to start to see, I think, more impacts, and Stephanie's program is specifically looking at what's going on in an airport environment, airport terminal environment. And if we get aircraft that will start getting delayed because of icing hazards tied back to their certification standards, what they can operate in, that'll start to have an effect as far as delays going into an airport also. While it's primarily a safety issue, if we don't address it, I think it can still impact people who are flying in and out of airports through delays.
Got it. And, you know, we do have the Tech Center right here in EHT. So, you know, Steph, working at the Tech Center, were there any advantages that the Tech Center offered that allowed you to take the lead in this position? Or, you know, was there anything unique that, you know, you personally were offering, you know, by being part of Tech Center which allowed you to be the lead for this project?
Yeah, so I'm within the aircraft icing research program at the Technical Center, and I believe I'm the only meteorologist in my division. So when it came time to identify a lead for Icicle, at the time it was worked into a different project I managed for the terminal area icing, and so I kind of fell into the role of lead in those early stages, and as time went on, it kind of just continued working out that way. Being at the Tech Center, it does give me leverage to work with a number of specialty groups within the Tech Center that gives me easy access to. And I also coordinate heavily with the folks in DC. So I was in an opportune position to be able to kind of help piece the parts together so everyone is up to date and communicating and working on everything together.
Gotcha. Now, Steph, you spent a good amount of time in Illinois, so I know you had a couple of Jersey stories while you were out there, right? Everybody was just jealous of you being in New Jersey, right?
Yeah, yes, very jealous. It's interesting how folks from other parts of the country that don't have a beach, despite the famousness, I guess you could say, of our boardwalks, some people aren't too familiar with them. So sharing some of the local treasures we have here was really a nice opportunity, especially with folks who are from other countries, because Icicle was an international program. So I got to spread the lovely tales of New Jersey and the various cultural uniqueness in our state with other folks, and it was well received. A lot of people have a perception about New Jersey, so I was happy to bring them something fresh about some of the great things we have going on here.
Well, we're glad you put a positive light in the minds of many people, not only across the country, but across the world. And Danny, you also spent time at the Tech Center too in EHT. What was your favorite part about being down here, or I should say up here for you, being that you now are in DC?
Well, of course, the shore and the beach and the ocean is always a big attraction. But I want to say that the Tech Center is just a fantastic place to work from a research and development, testing and evaluation. It's at the forefront of technology. Icicle was world-class scientific research and data collection. It doesn't get any better than that. And so that's the type of work that goes on there. And a lot of credit to Stephanie also, because she also has contacts with a lot of other organizations that participated in Icicle. And a lot of that has been built upon prior research that has been conducted at the Tech Center. So all of those things were there. So it just makes sense to have work like this come out of the Tech Center. And again, it's a world-class research facility, and it's a fun place to work. It really is.
I'm sure. And, I think you hit the nail on the head there. You said a world-class research facility right here in southeastern New Jersey. And, something we always love to talk about here at the press whenever we can. So, Danny and Steph, thank you guys so much for the time. I appreciate it. And to everyone listening out there, hope you get to enjoy the written story as well that you'll see with this too. So thank you again, everybody, for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.